You're doing awesome. Let's look at one more thing you can change. Notice how this says Android color and it says darker gray. I want to change it to something like black or maybe something like white. And we see the device updates on the right here. How about if we change it to my favorite color, blue? So it doesn't exactly work because blue is not a supported color. There's a limited set of colors provided by Android, but you can still access a whole range of other colors by specifying the exact hex color code. You can find those again in the material design spec for color. So each of these colors is given a name from the material team, like 50, 100, 200. So let's choose this blue here. You can double click to copy it and then go over to the code, and then instead of blue, I'm going to replace this with hashtag and then the hex color code. Cool. So now the background of the text view is this blue color. It looks pretty nice. So now you might be wondering if you can also change the text color. And yes, you can. So I'll add it right here. Android text color equals, and I can specify in quotations the hex value. So go back to the color guidelines and, I'll just pick a random color. I like green, so this color will do. Copy that and then paste that here in between the quotes. Hashtag and the hex code. And cool, now the device shows the green text color on the blue background. Now it's your turn. Change the color of the background and the text of the text view to 2 different colors from the material design spec. This is linked below, as well as the XML visualizer that has your starter code. Have fun! Okay, so hopefully you picked some colors from the Material Design color palette. I like this purple 500 color, so I'm going to go ahead and copy it. Then I'll go over to the code and then change the background color to be hashtag and then the hex code. Then the background of the text view updates to the purple color. Cool. Now to change the text color, I'm going to write Android text color with a capital C and then put double quotes. Okay, so then I'll go back to the color guidelines and pick something like, maybe this yellow looks good. Go over here and then paste it in between the quotes. Oops, I forgot the pound sign, and it says this color is not supported, so I need to put the hashtag symbol in first. Cool, and then we got yellow text on a purple background. It looks pretty awesome to me. We played around a little bit with text view, and the other view we want to learn about now to make our birthday card is the image view. Now here's the XML for image view. Let's look at the lines one at a time. The XML element starts with an open angle bracket, ding, and then the name of the view, whoosh, and then the list of attributes, pew, 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 pew. Then it's followed by a / and then a closing angle bracket, boom. When we wrote the XML for text view, it displayed text on the screen. So now when we write image view here, it displays an image on the screen. The first attribute is something we haven't seen before. It says Android source equals @drawable/cake. This is saying that the source for this image should be found in this file here. The file name is called cake. We use the @ symbol to say that we're referencing a resource in the Android app, and drawable is the resource type. A drawable is like a graphic that will be shown on screen in Android. And again, cake is the file image name. We don't include the file extension. Like, you don't need to say if it's a JPEG or a PNG image. Just say the file name. If you're wondering where this image came from, well, we handled this a little bit differently in the XML visualizer compared to the app. But basically, we loaded in a bunch of images beforehand so that you can use them to practice in the XML visualizer. When you build your app in Android Studio, you're going to have to add images manually into your app, into the drawable folder. Now, if I try to reference an image that doesn't exist, for example, the toys image does not exist, then there will be an error because toys is not a valid image. So make sure that you only reference images that are available. So let's change it back by hitting undo. Now we have the width and height, which are set to be wrapped content, so that the image view is only as big as the cake image inside of it. Lastly, we have this attribute called Android Scale Type, and it's set to be center. Scale Type tells the device how to scale up or scale down the image based on the bounds of the image view. Let's see what that looks like. Now you can see the cake image showing up on the device. The cake image is actually pretty large, and it's larger than the screen size. So when we say Scale Type, it doesn't change the size of the image, it just centers it. So we see that the cake image is actually really big, but this is the center of the cake image. We can set other values for scale type, such as center crop. This scales down the image to fit the height and width of the view. In this case, we're constrained by the size of the screen. We also maintain the aspect ratio of the original image so it doesn't get distorted. Once we scale it down, we also center the image and then crop it so that it fits this view size. When displaying photographs, I like to use center crop. This is because it's typically okay to crop off the edges of the photograph in order to achieve this edge-to-edge look. When images go edge-to-edge without any white border or anything, this is what we call a full bleed image. We use a lot of full bleed images in the material design guide. Here are some examples. You see how the images go edge-to-edge here, and it gives it a nice immersive feel. Okay, now it's time for you to try. Specifically, we would love for you to be able to change the height and width of the image view to be a fixed dp value. Try something like 100 dp. Then change the scale type between center and center crop. And you can also adjust the height and width of the image accordingly. For example, what happens if you change the height and width of the image view to be greater than the size of the device? Or what happens if you set the height and width to be something smaller than the size of the device? In those cases, you may see different behavior for center and center crop. Also try to change the image to something else by checking the Available Images link. We've included a small version of the cake image as well as a larger version so that you can try the different scale types. We also included an Android icon. Use the link below to get to the XML visualizer. If we try the smaller image, then we see that the image is actually smaller than the size of the screen. So it doesn't matter if we choose scale type to be center or center crop, the full image will be able to be shown in the view. And this is what it looks like with a photograph. Now let's try the icon. That was called Android. So the size of the icon is smaller than the size of the screen, so if we do wrap content for the width and height, then it should fit on the screen. It doesn't matter if we use center or center crop. Now what happens if we set the image view to be larger than the device size? Say we pick a really large number, like 900 dp in width and height. Then the image view will take up a size larger than the screen size, but the scale type is set to center, so the icon will be centered within that humongous image view. If we choose center crop though, the system tries to scale the image up to be a square of 900 dp by 900 dp, and then it centers and crops the image. Now that you've experimented with the Image View XML, hopefully you have a better idea of how to display images in your app. The documentation for Android is on a site called developer.android.com. It contains a lot of helpful information such as code samples, tutorials, and articles. You can think of it as an instruction manual for how to build apps. I use this site daily, and oftentimes I get to it using a Google search. I'll show you what I mean. Let's look at the documentation for text view. So I search for text view Android. The top link that comes up is a developer.android.com site, so I click on that. This is what we call the reference documentation for text view. I know there's a lot of information on this page and it can be overwhelming, but usually when you're looking at reference documentation, you're trying to solve a specific problem, so you can actually filter out all the unnecessary information that you don't need. When I come to this page, I check that it is indeed for text view. I may read the class overview, and then I can scroll down. This is the interesting part. It lists out the XML attributes. These are all the possible XML attributes for text view. It also includes a nice description on the right-hand side for what it does. Now you don't need to memorize all of these attributes. In fact, I haven't used some of them. I usually work with a small subset of them on a regular basis. But I know that if I ever need something special, I can always come to the text view documentation to find that specific attribute. Oh, here's one that we recognize, Android text size. So we click on it, and it links to the description of this attribute. It says that this controls the size of the text, and the recommended dimension type for text is SP, or scale pixels. For example, 15 SP. Cool, so we learned this earlier, and if you ever forget, you can always come back to the text view documentation and look up what the attribute is. Now say, for example, I don't know what the exact name is. In your web browser, you can use the Find feature to search the page. The other way to open up this Find window is to use Command F on Mac or Control F on Windows. Then I can type in what I'm looking for. Say, for example, I'm looking for a way to capitalize all the letters in a text view. This might be useful, for example, if I'm trying to show tabs like this, or if I'm creating a snack bar at the bottom of the screen, like this undo text here is in all caps. Buttons are also in all caps. Going back to the text view documentation, I can search for caps. I can browse through all the search results, but these look pretty good. It says that there's an XML attribute called Android text all caps. And this description says to present the text in all caps. If I click on it and read the description, it sounds like what I'm looking for. And it says the possible values for this attribute are either true or false. So I can try this out in code now. So going back to the XML visualizer, say I have this text view on screen, and I want to change it to be all caps. According to the documentation, I can add an attribute here that says Android text all caps, and then I can set it to be true or false. If I set it to true, then look, it's all in caps. Cool. The nice thing about this attribute is that I don't have to go and change the text, like, oh, the possibilities, and capitalize everything. Instead, I can leave the text as is, and all I need to do is just toggle this attribute to change it from true to false. Now it's your turn to practice. Being able to look at documentation and then update your code accordingly to try it out is a really useful skill to have. That means you don't have to memorize everything you could possibly ever want to do in Android. It's only a Google search away, and you can find it when you need it. So first, I want you to Google search for TextView Android to find the reference documentation for TextView. Then I want you to use the Find feature in your web browser to search the page for the XML attribute that makes the TextView text bold or italic. We haven't covered this XML attribute before, so this is an opportunity for you to learn it on your own. Once you find something that might work, go ahead and try to use it. If that doesn't work, then no problem at all. Just keep going back to the documentation until you find the one that works. Okay, so I asked you to search for TextView Android. Usually when I do a search, I always add the word Android at the end of it so that it only shows me Android results. The first link is for TextView and it's on the developer.android.com site, so I'm going to click on it. I can ignore most of the information on this page, except I do want to verify that this is indeed for TextView. I can read the class overview, but the most important thing is down here, the XML Attributes. So I can manually scroll the list, but that will literally take forever, so I'm going to use the find feature that I talked about earlier. The quiz question was about finding an attribute that would change the text to be bold or italic, so I'm going to search for the word bold. Cool, so let's look at this description. It says style, bold italic or bold italic for the text. That sounds pretty good, so I can click on this attribute. For Android text style, it seems that the different values are normal, bold, or italic. Let's try it out. The documentation says that if I add Android text style attribute, then I can set it to be bold, italic, or normal. So let's try bold. Nice, and it bolds the font. And let's be adventurous and try italic as well. Awesome, it italicizes the text. So this was an example of how you can look at documentation to find new attributes that you can set on your text view. In the future, when you're working on something and you get stuck or you don't know how to do it, remember that you can always use documentation as a resource.
My name is Kirill Grushnikov. I've been at Google for the last 5 years, and I do client work, UI work on the Play Store.
Okay, awesome. And what do you like about it?
Well, I always liked writing code and seeing pixels light up on the screen. So this is the Play app, Google Play app. Starting from top to bottom, we have the search box, then we have this what we call quick links to go to various subsections of the app and of the store, and then we have different content here. So we have clusters of cards, we have this we call a banner that gets you into some other place in the app. You can go into the details page of a certain item, let's say Angry Birds Stylopop, and this is what we're showing here, kind of the mix of information that developer has provided. We have the video of the app, then we have the short description of the app, screenshots, then we have the user provided content, reviews and ratings of that app, a little bit more related content, and then here a couple of links. And you can go and also from the details page you can start the install process. This is the permissions, and then you go and accept them, and it starts, you can see over here it starts installing it.
So the students have been learning about text views, image views, buttons. Can you point out a couple of those in the app?
Yeah, so back to the cards, if we look at this Star Wars Rebels, so the card itself is an extension of a view group, but it can be as simple as an extension of a relative layout. And then we have this thumbnail is an image view. Then we have this Star Wars Rebel is a text view that goes to maximum of 2 lines. Rating bar is, well, rating bar. The free is a text view, and the overflow dots is an image view with a source set to a certain PNG that looks like 3 dots. And then the same for the quick links. So it is a relative layout with the image view on the left, and then the text view in single line mode going to right of that image view and extending however much it needs. And it has its background set to a certain drawable that has a green background with rounded corners. So essentially, as you say, it boils down to taking these very basic building blocks, text views, image views, sometimes rating bar, progress bar, spinner, checkbox, radio button, and combining them based on what your design shows on a particular screen.
Yeah, that's so cool because the students are learning this in the very first lesson of Android, and you're using this every day in the Google Play app. You mentioned working with a designer, so can you describe what that process is like?
So it starts from the product people, and then it goes into discussions with design and engineering on what are the screens that we are talking about, and how hopefully already at that point on the design side we start thinking about how it adapts to smaller screens, to larger screens. And after that we do these kind of iterations on putting something on the screen and start validating the overall approach, because sometimes you have a static mock or maybe a motion mock from After Effects or whatever tools the designers are using, and you see it on your desktop screen, and then you put it on the phone and it feels quite different because you have a smaller screen, or because it's a touch interaction, or maybe because you are depending on all these great big images, but the network is slow, and so you start with this screen that 5 seconds doesn't display anything. And so hopefully throughout this iterative process where we put something on the screen, not necessarily pixel perfect, then we can go back into the product level discussions and see, okay, what do we need to tweak.
So for developers who don't have a designer to work with, do you have suggestions on what they can do to make their app look better?
I would suggest going to the website for material design and get acquainted not necessarily with the finer parts of motion arcs or all those interpolators, but focus on the bigger picture. So to have consistent grid across the entire app, what we call key lines, or what the design calls key lines, vertical and horizontal, where elements align to certain visual rhythm, and they don't feel just randomly thrown onto the screen. And so you have your toolbar, you have maybe your other parts of your Chrome, like the navigation elements in your screen, and then you have the content itself. So it's great when it all aligns to the same grid, and you have a little bit of margins on the sides, and things are not too close to each other. Then you have typography, which is a great way to visually convey the relative importance of different things. So if you talk about something like inbox, or like Gmail, or like an email app, so if everything has the same typographical language, if everything is the same color, the same size, and the same style, then it's not really easy to scan it. So maybe you would want there to make the sender a little bit bigger, like the sender name, or maybe the title, or like the first few words of the subject to be bold, and that would allow the user to more quickly scan. Depends once again on your content, but I wouldn't recommend necessarily going with too many styles or too many sizes. 3-4 styles used consistently across multiple screens allow the user to kind of get, even on a subconscious level, to get kind of a picture of how to get things done in your app, and not necessarily fight to understand where the information is that he or she is looking for. And the last thing, colors. Use a little bit of, especially with material, it kind of leans toward using big splashes of saturated colors, which looks great, especially if it goes into the status bar on Lollipop devices. Identify maybe, what we call them, accent colors and primary colors. Identify a couple colors and use them to to style the Chrome of your app. So like status bar, action bar, maybe a little bit in the drawer, in the navigation drawer. And use highlights or accents for the floating action button, or maybe for to draw attention to a certain very important element, what you consider an important element. And I think these three go a long way towards emphasizing a little bit more like, you know, the visual style of the app. And of course, if you have an opportunity to team up with the designer, that's always great.